Before I begin, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take or a burning question or something that you've just been dying to say for the game. We are all ears, and if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, then you can go ahead and use Super Chat. You can just click on the $ below the chat box and send in your comments and donations that way, and your comments are guaranteed to get featured on the next show. If Super Chat isn't really your thing, that's totally fine. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker and in the description, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Again, the link for in displayed below the ticker is gsmcpodcast.net. And without further ado, let's go ahead and continue on with the second segment, which is talking about the WNBA postseason. Now, I said that a lot of you probably had no idea what even went down during the postseason, and I'll tell you why I said that. The WNBA games started at the exact same time that the NFL games were going on. Now, let's do a poll, guys. How many of you guys tuned into the first WNBA postseason game? Exactly. Because at 1 o'clock, my New York Giants were playing. And I'm sorry to say this, I am a very big supporter of women's sports. I pedal it to the absolute most. You can ask anybody in this school. I really love supporting the women and their sports. But I did not tune into the WNBA playoffs as they were happening live. In fact, the only game that I legitimately tuned into for a bit was Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever against the Connecticut Sun. But the big reason why I even tuned into that game was because my Giants game already ended, and because I'm a fan of Caitlin, and Connecticut Sun actually play in the state where I go to school. So it's like, there's a lot of things that I like about the matchup. And even then, I didn't tune into it nearly as much as I wanted to tune into the Cowboys losing. Like, these games, they happened at the worst possible times. And I just cannot understand why the broadcast team decided to start their playoff games on a Sunday. Like, the NBA in the bubble could not compete with the NFL during the season when they were both playing. Like, the NBA finals were going on, and more people were tuning in to the NFL regular season than they were in the finals. It was the least watched NBA finals in the history of NBA finals because of the NFL. And so, what makes the broadcast team think that if the NBA can't compete with the NFL, what makes them think that the WNBA can compete with the NFL? It just can't. It doesn't make any sense. And this is coming off arguably the best WNBA season ever since the WNBA was found. The best season, the most viewed season without a doubt. And they choose to start their games on Sunday when the NFL is playing. I cannot stand whoever thought that was a good idea. I think whoever thought that was a good idea should immediately be removed from their job, because it's like, what is that? You can't do that. No one was going to tune into those games. And I watched the highlights after the game, yes, and after all the NFL games, but you're not getting the viewership that you need live. It just doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? On a Monday, I understand, starting on a Monday, early in the morning, before the NFL does its coverage, because you cannot compete with the NFL. You just can't. The viewership difference between the NBA and then the NFL, the NBA in the playoffs was drawing around 6 million viewers. The NFL was drawing 22 million viewers. And that was one game. There were multiple games going on that were drawing way more viewers than that singular NBA game that had playoff implications. It was just a regular season NFL game, and it was getting more views than a playoff NBA game. What? You can't do that. But enough with my little rant about, the timing of these games, because thankfully somebody on the broadcast team realized, okay, this is not going to work, and there's no game happening today on Monday. Genius. There's going to be 2 games that are happening on Tuesday. Thank God, because, and thank whoever it is that you guys believe in, it doesn't matter, because that's when nobody is going to be watching these games, and they happen at 7:30 and 9:30. Thank you. That is prime time on a day when there's no football and no NBA basketball going on. That's much more like it. And that's way more people are going to be tuning into this. I know for sure I'm going to be tuning into the WNBA playoffs when they're happening tomorrow. Like, because 7:30 the first game starts, and then the next game starts at 9:30. That is much more like it. On a Tuesday, perfect. Then the next game is going to happen the next series of games is going to happen on Wednesday, again, 7:30, 9:30. No problems there because there's no football there. Again, much more like it. And then Thursday the games aren't going to happen at, let's say, these games are only going to happen if necessary because they're game threes and it's a 3-game series. So if necessary, the games will happen on Thursday and they're going to happen at 1 o'clock. That is way more like it, and that is not during a time when the NFL is doing its coverage. So who knows? Maybe I'll tune into the Liberty game, or if they even need a game 3, while my podcast is going on. That is much more like it. And then same thing applies for Friday. The games are going to start at 1 o'clock. Again, much more like it, and exactly what the WNBA needs to do if they want to maintain their viewership. However, they still have the semifinal games happening on a Sunday. Why? Why do you want your games to happen on a Sunday? You're not going to get any kind of viewership. It doesn't make any sense. Please, I beg of the WNBA to change that schedule, because they're not helping themselves at all. They are not. They genuinely are not. They cannot compete with the NFL. Period. End of story. But anyways, let me actually talk about the results of these first games. So, right now, in the bracket, the Liberty have beat the Dream. Surprise. They won 83-69, and now they hold a 1-game series lead, and now they look to finish the game on Wednesday, I believe. Yes, they look to finish the series tomorrow, actually, and close out in 2 games and sweep them. 2 games decides the series. That's all you got to really win. It's like a play-in. It's like a play-in tournament, the first round, essentially. Then the Fever got blown out by the Connecticut Sun. More on that game later. And so now Fever, they have to hope to win back-to-back games in order to actually even have a chance of advancing into the next round. The Phoenix Mercury, they lost to the Minnesota Lynx 95-102. And again, I'll update the box scores as well. I'm just giving the series update. So the Lynx lead 1-0, and the Aces ended up beating the Seattle Storm in the first game of the matchup. So essentially all of the top seeded teams ended up winning in the first game. And really it was no competition for a majority of these games. And I mean, which makes the viewership even worse, because if the games aren't necessarily that competitive, people are going to tune into football a little bit more than they're going to tune into a game where one team is up by 20 and then the other team is like losing badly and playing really badly. I mean, that's exactly what happened when I tuned into the Fever game, because the Fever game, they were down by 20 by the time I tuned in, and I was like, all right, well, this game is boring. This game is essentially over. And then I tuned it right back to the NFL. So this is not helping. It's really not helping the WNBA at all. But more so on the box scores of this game. So, and all these games, excuse me. The Liberty, the best player for the Liberty was The best player for the Liberty was obviously Brianna Stewart. She ended the game with 20 points and 11 rebounds. Sabrina Ionescu didn't really have a dominant game like how I expected. However, 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists is still rather impressive. And shooting 5 for 11 from the field is also pretty impressive as well. And a surprise standout for the Liberty in this game was Leonie Fibic. Forgive me if I messed up that last name, but she averaged 6 points per game throughout the WNBA season. And out of nowhere in this playoff games, drops 21 points, shoots 7 of 8 from the field, and 4 for 4 from 3. Fantastic game coming in from the Liberty. And the Liberty are just an overall better team than the Atlanta Dream, obviously, because, I mean, they are the 1 seed going up against the 8th seed. It only makes sense that the Liberty is going to... I have a feeling that the Liberty are going to sweep this series. But again, it only makes sense that the Liberty end up winning this game. And the Dream, I believe they are one of the few teams in this entire playoffs that has a losing record. Like, their record in the regular season was 15-25. So that goes to show you just how their season progressed. And actually, no, the Mercury have a losing record as well. So I wonder what happened to Diana over there. But speaking of which, yeah, we'll go ahead and talk and cover that game next. So the Mercury, they ended up losing 95-102 to the Lynx. The Lynx are a fantastic team. And Natasha Cloud, out of nowhere for the Mercury, ended up dropping 33 points and 10 assists. But it just wasn't enough for the Lynx and their defense, and as well as another player on their offense that performed phenomenally well in the postseason. The Nafisha Collier, forgive me if I messed up that last name, ended up dropping 38 points, 4 assists, and 6 rebounds for the Minnesota Lynx. And Kayla McBride ended up dropping 20 points, 4 assists, and 3 rebounds for the Lynx as well, propelling them into a huge win. Collier shot a lot of free throws as well, ended up draining 13 for 14 of her free throws. But on the Mercury side, as I mentioned before, Cloud, she played phenomenally well. Brittany Griner was a little bit of a no-show for a majority of this game, ended up scoring 10 points and getting 6 rebounds. Again, I don't know what all that is about. Shot 3 for 10 from the field, looking a little bit like Angel Reese missing those layups, apparently. Jokes aside. And Diana Taurasi ended the game with 21 points, 2 assists, and 2 rebounds, and shot 8 for 16 from the field, so 50% overall, and 5 for 10 from the 3. Not a bad game, but again, not enough to propel them to a win, and they suffered the loss. The Fever, now this one, I don't know if you want to count this as a shocking game. I mean, I didn't really think it was that shocking because this was the first ever playoff game that Caitlin Clark has ever played in. Of course, she's going to struggle. That being said, she ended the game with 11 points and ended up going 4 for 17 from the field, 2 for 13 from 3. That is pretty bad. That is actually really bad, and especially to her expectations. But this one WNBA player that I do want to bring to attention, Dawana Boner, forgive me if I messed up that last name. I don't know if it's Bonner or Boner, whichever it is. She held Caitlin Clark to 0 for 7 from the field and literally, completely locked her up every single time that she was the primary defender for Caitlin. So Caitlin's going to have to figure out a way to work around that in the postseason, and she's also going to have to figure out the postseason. But overall, the Fever did not play well. It makes total sense because this entire franchise has not made the playoffs since Caitlin Clark has been drafted. And since before Caitlin Clark has been drafted, it took them 8 years. So it makes total sense how this roster and this team is not used to being in the postseason. This happened with Charles Barkley when he was on Phoenix. A lot of people remember him for playing really bad in Game 1, but he says that everybody was nervous. It was the first ever playoff game that the team actually played. So it makes total sense. You don't know how to handle the nerves. It makes total sense. And the Sun, they played pretty well as a team, and Boner was the leading scorer, ended the game with 22 points, while also simultaneously locking up Caitlin Clark. Very good ball right there. And there was also Marina Mabrey coming off of the bench, surprisingly, scoring 27 points, shot 9 for 20 from the field, but still 27 points is fantastic. And now, the final game, that since we are running out of time, the Aces ended up going against the Storm. This is arguably the more even matchup because, they're the 4th and the 5th seed. Their records are roughly the same, only a difference in 2 games. And, they're talented. Both teams are rather talented. However, the Aces ended up coming out on top with this one thanks to Aja Wilson, the unanimous MVP, dropping 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 assists, and also accumulating 5 blocks, which is another thing that's rather underrated about her game. They also had help from Tiffany Hayes coming off the bench, scoring 20 points, getting 5 steals, 4 rebounds, and 1 assist as well. Just an overall great game coming in from the Aces. And the Storm, they did not have a 20-point per game scorer, and they did not really, their leading scorers did not shoot very efficiently from the field. So maybe it's also a nervous thing. The best player on their team with the most points ended up going 5 for 15, then the one below that, 6 for 15, then 6 for 17, then Jordan Horston ended up going 3 for 4, which was pretty good. But then we go back to mediocrity. Mercedes Russell ended up going 3 for 7. Lloyd ended up going 2 for 8. 0 for 1, 0 for 1 coming in from the rest of the guards and the forwards. And you guys could understand why they ended up losing the game. Just inefficient shooting overall from the team. So that's the first round of the postseason wrapped up. The next elimination games are going to happen during the week on Tuesday and Wednesday for those of you guys that want to tune into those games. And then the next round, again, I have a problem with it, and I'm going to be screaming at it from the mountaintops until the end of time. The WNBA games should not go on when the NFL games are going on. I'm not going to stop saying that. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of that. But at the end of the day, we do have to go to a short break, and so I will be going into the third segment where I list off all of the WNBA award winners because, I have to pay respect for all the WNBA players. So I will be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.